Welcome to the Humans versus Retirement podcast with me, Dan Haylett. This show will help you navigate the intricate financial and non-financial landscape of retirement planning, investment and income strategies, and the human experience beyond the traditional work-life paradigm. Join me as I delve into the challenges, triumphs, and unexpected journeys individuals face as they transition into this new phase of life. From experts across many different areas to personal stories, we uncover the secrets, insights, and practical tips to empower you on your retirement journey. Whether you're just starting to consider retirement or already enjoying this chapter, this podcast is your guide to making the most out of this remarkable phase of life. Now, on to the show. Hello everyone and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Humans versus Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Dan Haylett. Today's conversation is with the brilliant Lyman. Al is known as the Age Optimizer and coaches aging and aspiring adults to take back their health so they can optimize their age and live stronger in their second half. Al is the author of Age Well and Feel Great, the proven path to solving the aging puzzle and going the distance. He is the creator of the Beat Aging Transformation Program and unbelievably the finisher of 9 Ironmans. In this episode, Al and I discuss the importance of health and quality of life in retirement. Al emphasises the difference between lifespan and healthspan, highlighting the need to focus on the quality of years rather than just the number of years lived. Al shares personal anecdotes about his mother's health struggles and how that impacted her and her family. He provides practical steps for boosting energy and health in retirement, including focusing on real food, reducing sugar intake, and incorporating exercise. Al also addresses the importance of strength training, maintaining muscle mass, and the enjoyment and achievement that come with taking control of one's health in retirement. Al emphasises the need to prioritise health over material possessions and accumulate wealth for the purpose of enjoying time and experiences, and shares his personal experiences and aspirations for his own second half, highlighting the importance of living a healthy lifestyle and creating meaningful memories with loved ones. Now, on to the conversation with Al Lyman. Al Lyman, a warm welcome to the Humans versus Retirement podcast.
Dan, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to join you today and talk about all things aging and health span and longevity. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I can't wait, Al. I came across, I think it was just some random LinkedIn post that you put in, and it come across my feed. And as soon as I saw that post and I saw your headline, The Age Optimizer, and Googled you, which we always do, right? We kind of, when we see someone of interest, we Google them. Looked at your website, which we linked in all the show notes. I thought, I've got to get Al on the podcast because one of the biggest non-financial elements of a long and happy retirement is health. And our health and how we view ourselves and how we can increase our health span, increase our longevity, increase our energy, I think changes over time. And it's often an ignored element of living a healthy, long life. So I can't wait to kind of get stuck into your knowledge, both working with people in that area, but also yourself. And I'm sure we'll get into your 9 Ironmans that you've completed at some point during this conversation. So it's coming from a personal struggle and journey of training as well, right?
Absolutely. And I have to say, Dan, as soon as I heard from you, I loved the title of your podcast, which is to say the humans versus the retirement, because in my world, the word retirement is really not my favorite word, right? I mean, I always think it's so much about getting up every day and having a mission and a purpose and a reason to get up out of bed that really drives all of us. So I was excited to get your note, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Perfect. Yeah. It's that as someone who specializes in working with people that are approaching and dealing with, and going into retirement, I've said it many times, if I could ban the word, I'd love to ban the word.
Right, yeah,
But I think
absolutely.
what I'm looking to do is re-engineer it and make it mean something different. So we're on the same page there. And we'll probably come back to that, I think, which is quite an interesting conversation to have. Al, to kick off, I really want to just get your view on, and I know you wrote a really, really good blog on this, and I've wrote something on it and done a drawing and a sketch on this, but the definition of kind of health span and lifespan, what I think we often get caught up in this, we're living longer, but our health span is, I think anyway, more important than lifespan, because that is the energy and the activity and everything that we can do. Have you got any thoughts around that and that as a topic?
Well, for sure, Dan. It's interesting in this day and age where there is a lot of focus on certainly modern medical technology and pharmaceuticals and things like that extend potentially the length of our lives, right? Give us more years. But I know in my experience in looking around and, certainly seeing folks in my circle and even in the world at large, uh, drawing that distinction between the quality of our years, our ability to really enjoy our lives and whatever and however long we're here, versus just a number, which is to say, this is how long I've lived or how long a certain person lived. To me, there are dramatically and important differences between the two. And I'll share just a personal little anecdote. This past week, my mom passed away. And I write about my mom quite a bit in my book, Age Well and Feel Great, specifically in the epilogue of the book. And when she passed this past January, she was 93. And of course, when someone hears, that someone lived until 93, their first reaction is, wow, that's fantastic. What a life. And certainly, I've enjoyed having my mom around, and her grandkids and great grandkids as well enjoyed having her up until this past week. But what most people don't know is that my mom suffered greatly, actually, for decades. In fact, in my mind, there's no logical reason why she would have lived as long as she did. But we know that a lot of life and health is a mystery. So in the book, I write about this idea, or I should say this question that I asked my mom, and it was literally about 20 years ago. And I asked her, Mom, what would you do differently today if you knew that you were going to live to be 100, but you weren't guaranteed of good health along the way? And she scoffed at me and kind of stiff-armed me and pushed me away. And the reality is that, her suffering and the quality of the years and how much her ill health impacted everybody in the family and created, I have to say, a little bit of resentment and difficulty with my siblings and all the adjustments, in their lives to care for my mom. I mean, to be a caregiver, takes such a huge heart, but it's a tremendous responsibility. In the book, I say that the very last thing any of us would want is to be a burden on those we love the most, especially at a point in their lives when they want to enjoy themselves as well. So we've got this really strange juxtaposition of length of life versus the quality of the years. I know for myself, Dan, there's so much to enjoy about life, our relationships, getting outside in nature, social activities, meaningful work and a purpose, and all of these things. But in my mind, none of that is possible without good health. Fundamentally, having good health, right? Let's say delaying the onset of chronic disease for as long as possible and compressing that period of time of suffering and where we are, not of our own choosing, a burden on those we least want to burden. to me, that is really what I want to focus on and what I try to help people understand. And listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, who wouldn't want to live as long as possible? I mean, I'd be a fool to say I wouldn't want to live a long life. But to me, the quality of the years is what matters the most. And the truth is that we have a tremendous amount of control over the quality of our life and the quality of our years, and at least giving ourselves the best opportunity to extend that health span and compress that period of suffering or illness versus, what my mom experienced. So I sit here right now. I mean, I have a lot of emotions going through me because you can imagine, and you're a very intuitive guy. In the short time that we've had a chance to meet, I think you understand. Here I am, a guy who wrote a book, who's been so passionate about this topic and living literally my entire life to learn what it would take to create good health over a lifespan, to extend health span. And yet I was able to sit back and watch my mom suffer in the way that she did. And the book is dedicated to my dad, who passed at 65 from cancer 23 years ago. So we've got this strange juxtaposition where my mom suffered for decades without my dad, without her soulmate, without the person she loved more than any other, and suffered dearly along the way. Dan, it's crazy. My mom, we sat once and counted it up. My mom has been under the knife, actually in the operating room 48 times. And I say she has been, of course, she's now passed, but just a small little snippet of the suffering that she went through, because that's a lot of needle pricks. That's a lot of blood draws. That's a lot of anesthesia. There's so much I think that she could have done to lessen that suffering, but it's a mystery why we make the choices that we make. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, in this conversation. So yeah, to me, and I know you feel the same way, it is about the quality of the years.
A really moving story. I'm so sorry to hear about your mother, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's resonated hugely with me, and I know it's going to resonate hugely with the listeners. So I massively appreciate that. Thank you. And I think it absolutely chimes into the conversations that I have with people. A couple of points that I think will really kind of resonate with you and the listeners. I often hear that, I don't want to be a financial burden to my children in later life. And my comment back is, what about the emotional burden? What about the physical burden? What about people concentrate on the numbers, but actually, if you can take care of yourself, as you said, you're not going to be potentially the emotional burden or the time burden that you might be on your children if you're in good health for as long as you possibly can. So I think that's a really, really interesting point to get across to the listeners on that. You're not only taking care of yourself, but you're kind of taking care of the ones that you love and cherish at the same time.
Sure. And your point about the financial burden is real, Dan, because just as a quick aside, I have a very good friend, and listen, we don't want to make this whole conversation about sadness, but I tell the story in the book of about a very good friend who passed from prostate cancer. It was diagnosed initially as prostate cancer. He was 54, and he passed about 6 months ago. And of course, I wrote the book probably about a year and a half ago now, but he had over 100 chemotherapy treatments. And I knew from speaking to his wife that the total cost for the treatments that he endured and all of the care involved in managing his disease and trying to help him just simply to extend the length of his life a little bit, totaled over $1 million. And I think for you and I, we can sit here now and go, you can spend your whole life earning money and collecting assets. And in the end, give it all back to try to chase a few more weeks or months of the kinds of opportunities. I like to say, Dan, if we could see our memories in advance, would we do something differently, right? Like if he could have seen, what he was going through in advance of having been diagnosed, and he would have fully admit, if he were here today, as he told me when we talked, that it was about, for him, early diagnosis. He simply didn't get the checkups, didn't see the doctors, didn't raise his hand when he had symptoms that would have given him a better chance to survive. But imagine seeing your memories in advance. For our listeners, think for one moment what it's like to have every person in your life have their lives dominated by caring for you, and watching all of your assets go away or become, God, the Medicare, Medicaid world is vicious. So there are so many prices to pay emotionally, financially, and they are, in many instances, at the very least, things that we can delay. And I want to acknowledge, even before we go on, that, as I sit here, I've thought about this every day of my adult life. But I know that there's a lot of mystery, as to why certain people get sick and other people don't. But I have to say the science unequivocally is clear in that 80% of our health outcome is really a product of our lifestyle choices over a great length of time. And there's a lot of things involved in that, right? The dangers of modern living and the exposures to our environment, many of which we're not aware of. I tell my significant other, don't carry your cell phone around with you all day. Put it away. Don't keep it near the bed at night. We don't know the impact of things like that, or microplastics. But it's also, 80-20 rule comes into play here. It's about the food we eat and the exercise we're able to get. And these things have a huge impact on our opportunities to create the best outcome for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. On that theme then, let's kind of go into some maybe some practicalities around some of your work that you've done with your clients and what you've seen with people. What are, I suppose, two questions in one here, Al, for you, and answer what you feel. But what steps then can people start to take in retirement to boost their energy and keep active? And alongside that, kind of what are some of the keys to living that kind of long, happy and healthy, as you kind of say, second phase or victory lap retirement, or what are some of the practical things that you can kind of divulge from your work that you've done?
I think, Dan, and as I think you're aware, my primary background as a therapist, and as a coach, and certainly as an athlete is endurance sports and strength and conditioning. So exercise is really my background. But I say in my book, and I really believe this, that the most important factor in determining our health outcome is the food that we eat. And the reality is that we live in an age where, quite honestly, Dan, profits drive a lot of what's happening in the food industry and in the pharmaceutical industry. Processed, industrialized food is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. The messages that we're getting are to eat this food morning, noon, and night. So I think from a practical standpoint, what I usually suggest to people is, let's begin to look at what it is that you're eating. And if you could just make one change, it would be to focus on eating real food versus something that's processed. It sounds really simple. And by the way, small changes are where to start, always and forever. If you try to make a change if you overhaul your diet in one night or embark on this really aggressive exercise program, you're absolutely bound to fail. But I think when I use the simple phrase real food versus processed food, and I ask people to consider what's on a food label, the longer it is, the more processed it is. Where did a food come from? Did it come from the ground? Is it animal sourced from another animal? Versus something that's in a box or a package. It's cliche to talk about our grocery stores and the idea that what's around the perimeter is where we want to focus, and that's absolutely true. So from a practical standpoint, here's something so simple. One food that you typically eat that's processed in some way, shape, or form, try to remove that food. just that one thing. And if we can do that, then we can build upon it. Inevitably, it comes back to sugar. When we look at chronic disease, Dan, and this is across the board, whether we're talking about dementia, including Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, or ALS, i.e. Lou Gehrig's disease, or we look at cancers from all types, when we look at cardiovascular disease, when we look at any of these chronic diseases, the diseases that are killing us, that are shortening our health span, all of these diseases have a central linchpin. This is what the science is showing us. And that central linchpin is metabolic health. That is to say, how our body produces and utilizes energy, what happens in those little cell organelles inside our cells called mitochondria. So what do I mean by that? I'm coming back to sugar. I'm coming back to processed sugar, how our body handles that sugar that comes into our body, how that sugar increases the secretion of insulin, the master hormone, which is secreted by the pancreas to lower our blood sugar in response to eating sugar. Elevated levels of insulin are absolutely ubiquitous across all of these chronic diseases. In my book, in chapter 9, titled Insulin Resistance and Hyperinsulinemia, I say insulin resistance is at the root of virtually all chronic diseases. So again, from a practical point of view, just take one processed food and replace it with some kind of a real food, right? If you can, just one thing. And along with that, really be honest and look at the amount of sugar that's coming into your body and the hidden sources of the sugar, because it's in all processed food. So at the end of the day, if we can come back to looking at foods, and I'm a big believer in the quality of animal sourced foods as being a tremendous source of nutrients. I'm a big believer that we should never remove entire food groups from our diet. I believe human beings are omnivores. We need plants and fruits to some degree, of course, but we need and benefit from the nutrients that are in animal-sourced foods as well. So from a very practical point of view, again, real food versus processed food. Now, when we talk about exercise, we all have a different starting point. And it's absolutely undeniable that exercise, which I think of as hormetic stress or hormesis, which is to say, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. The human body thrives on physical stress, right? We're all, as we age, we're like, we can't wait to get to the point where we can retire and make things easier on ourselves, right? And we already have easy lives compared to what really we should have, right? We're from the garage door opener to the remote control. It's cliche, but the human body thrives on physical stress. We need it in order to remain healthy. So we're all at a different starting point. And I would say, listen, if you're on the couch and largely sedentary, then 5 minutes of consistent walking where you try to get a little bit out of breath could be a huge game changer for you. Certainly if someone's listening and they're already resistance training, but perhaps they may not be doing any, what I think of as cardiovascular exercise, where they're elevating their heart rates for, say, 15 or 20 minutes. So that could be benefit. Maybe somebody's going to yoga right now, but they're not doing resistance training. So these are the things, again, one tiny little change, not going from being sedentary to saying, hey, I'm going to start a running program. That would be crazy. Right? That would be a recipe for disaster because injury is lurking right around the corner. Tiny little changes where we're just willing to do something so small or seemingly so small that it's almost no change at all. And then back it up, because consistency in all of these things is the key. And I'll stop there by just simply emphasizing that point. It isn't about, the 30 minutes of exercise that I do today and then I don't do anything for 10 days. It's about 5 minutes that I can do today that I can back up every day without even thinking about it. It becomes part of my lifestyle, it becomes a habit, becomes an automatic way in which I function. And the same is true with food. Right? If we can get that one single tiny, like maybe it's that small bag of potato chips that we had left over from, the deli that we visited, get it out of your house. And the next time you go to the deli, don't make that choice. Just that one decision. And you're going to say, Dan, and a lot of the listeners are going to say, well, all right, well, isn't there an easier way? I mean, isn't there a hack? I mean, no, at the end of the day, small changes, but you have to decide it's worth it. You have to choose your hard, right? Making a decision, even a small one, about the food we eat or the exercise we get is hard. Change is hard. But I would argue suffering with chronic illness, suffering with dysfunction and pain that's debilitating, those are also hard. So we've got to choose our hard to some degree, make it as easy on ourselves as we can. But there's no quick fix or hack that's going to create the change that we really need.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely fantastic. So much to take away there. I think the human brain is naturally lazy, right? So it's always going to go to the path of least resistance. And if you let it take over, you're going to sit on your couch. And I think one of the things I do want to kind of get your take on, and again in your work coaching your clients, because I say, I mean, on your website, it says that it's aspiring aging adults that, and I think that's amazing. That in terms of the people that you work with to take back their health, optimize their age, live stronger. Another phrase on your website that I love is beat the doctor dance and take back your health. I mean, I think that's so cool. But kind of with that in mind, I think if the journey of stepping back from either a successful business that you might exit or kind of a corporate career that you've had, there has to be, as you've said, there has to be intention, doesn't there? There has to be an intention to do stuff. What I've seen people do is actually have a reasonably healthy time when they're in corporate world. They've got a routine, they've got a structure, they play squash, or they do things in some social time. Yet that they leave that environment, and the easiest thing to do is then order the takeaway, is to then watch the television, is to drink that extra glass of wine, that bottle of beer, because it feels like then time's a bit. So I think maybe in retirement, you need to be even more intentional than you were in your working career. Is that something that you kind of come across working with kind of coaching your clients?
Absolutely, Dan. One of the things that I catch myself saying all the time is that what most people think of as good health isn't. And I think the first thing to remember is that, chronic disease is largely insidious, and it doesn't manifest symptoms until it's had an opportunity in many instances to grab hold within our body. And I know a lot of our listeners, and I know this is true because it's true with the folks that I work with. They latch on to the one thing that they might do. You mentioned going, and playing squash. I've had so many people say to me, well, I go to the gym 3 times a week. And as that person is sharing that with me, I can see that they've got a significant amount of visceral fat and a little bit of a pot belly. Or I know that they, have got a drinking habit. It may only be 1 or 2 drinks a day, but it's consistent day in and day out. So we tend to latch onto those 1 or 2 things that we feel like we're doing well and kind of ignore the things that we're not doing as well as we could be. And so one of the things that I try to do with the folks that I coach is we start by saying, let's get a good baseline of everything. Let's get some blood work. Let's see where things like triglycerides are. Let's look at what your level of chronic inflammation is. The best marker for that is something referred to as C-reactive protein, or HSCRP, because chronic inflammation is absolutely at the root of so much chronic disease. Let's get some blood work. Let's really see where you're at. Let's take account of the medications that you are now taking. Let's start by seeing if we can undo some of the damage of some of these things that exist right now. For a lot of folks, Dan, it's about weaning them off medications that I don't believe or that I help them understand that they could do without, because there are so many side effects to medications like statins to control cholesterol, which a statin is, to be very honest with you, a poison. Its singular goal is to lower LDL cholesterol, what we think of as bad cholesterol. But the reality is the downstream effects of a statin are disastrous for our health. It's my opinion, but it's backed up by a significant amount of science. So the point being, we can sometimes be taking medications that mask a symptom or create more symptoms. And now we're like a dog chasing our tail, trying to figure out what's going on. So I love to start with this idea of, hey, what can we stop doing that may be creating some long-term effects we don't desire? And then how can we get a really good baseline of exactly where you are right now, right? Looking at blood work, looking at lifestyle. And of course, listen, and we talked about this briefly earlier, I think before we went live. There's mindset is everything, because I think most people, when challenged, would say that they're afraid of the unknown, that their brains are fearful of what may happen as the result of X, Y, or Z. So it's kind of our human nature to step back and go, I'm just going to stay the way I am because at least I know where I am, right? Until it's too late. And then we can't, right, go back. So I work so hard to try to help people to foster a belief in the power of their choices. And again, tiny little changes. Let's not overhaul everything at once, but let's try this one thing and see what kind of effect it has. And let's monitor by looking again at blood work, which I do frequently with folks. Let's look at these numbers. Let's talk about what they really mean. And again, working with healthcare providers where I can, because I think that at the end of the day, we've got to work together to help ourselves to get to a point where we have more control, where we feel like we have more control. And it's an incredible feeling. It's so gratifying to work with somebody who started out on 10 medications, literally, right? Because most folks my age, I'm 64, most folks my age are on a half a dozen medications, right? They're on a high blood pressure, hypertension medication. They may be on a statin to lower cholesterol. They may be on an anxiety drug of some kind. And I could go down the list. But it's incredibly gratifying to reach a point after a few months where I can get somebody to the point where they're on none of those medications. And along with it, their energy has come back. And along with it, their ability to sleep through the night, get at least 6 hours of quality sleep. Because, man, for someone my age, we don't sleep, to the degree that we need to. And sleep is so important.
Hi, everyone. Dan here. I just wanted to jump in real quick to say that if you are thinking about or unsure where to start with your retirement plans, then I've put together what I believe to be one of the best free resources for you. My Retirement Toolkit is packed with videos, guides, webinars, worksheets, blogs, and podcast episodes, and is completely free to download. Just go to the show notes where you will find the link. Now, let's get back to the show. Something just come to me. I saw, as you were talking through that, and back to your point about sugar and like small steps, I saw something on, it must be true because it's on Twitter, right? Or X, so it must be true. But I think it is true. But I saw something that basically one bottle of Coke, full fat Coca-Cola every day, it equates to a calorie intake of 1.5 stone, which I find amazing. That, and if you think that over a year, that is right. So, if you drank one bottle of Coke every day for a year, one small kind of 500 ml bottle of Coke, that's 1.5 stones. Oh, we work in stones over here. So I don't know what that is in pounds. Of course. But 1.5 stones of excess weight, right? Just think about, if you drink a bottle of Coke a day and you replace that with water, that just fundamental foundational shifts. And again, like you're saying, one thing I absolutely subscribe to and love is that I think a lot of people kind of enter their retirement quite rightly with this kind of get-go mindset. And they're like, right, I've got vigor, let's go, what we're going to do. And actually one of the challenges I find is that they often go too hard, too fast. And there isn't this kind of foundational, as you said, blood work, what works, what doesn't, what's daily habits can I do? I've probably got more time on my hands to cook fresh food. If I want to learn new skills, I can learn how to cook. I can learn about this stuff. So, I think everything, to me, if you kind of plot it out, plan it, take your time around it, you can really make some material differences, can't you? In a very short space of time, if you
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I mean, listen, we all have this inclination to, once we make a decision, to want to, just eat the entire thing, right? And just jump right in. But what we're really looking for, what I look for with every person I work with, Dan, is a true transformation to a different lifestyle. And it's a different set of beliefs, honestly and truly. And one of the things, as an aside, that I work with folks and encourage them to do, and for some people it's really hard. But I ask each a person I work with to journal every day. And talk about the things that they're grateful for and acknowledge what I call their why, which is to say the reason why they're making the choices that they're making, because your why is everything, right? Where do you want to be, and what are the experiences you want to have, and what are the memories you want to create? And so the journaling process, along with rejuvenation and reflecting, is also a part of it, right? It isn't just about get out the hammer and now your body becomes a nail, or your habits become a nail and you just hammer away, because that's not sustainable over the long term. But what is sustainable are tiny changes and revisiting why you're doing the things you're doing, and challenging your belief systems to think differently about the aging journey. One of the things I say in my book, Dan, just as an aside, is I hate the phrase anti-aging. When I see somebody on LinkedIn and I see in their profile, anti-aging this or that, I immediately become skeptical, and I really am not interested in what that person has to say, because to me that phrase glorifies youthfulness, and it sort of emphasizes this idea that I can hack my way to being younger. The truth of the matter is, what we all want to do is embrace every chapter of our life for what it can offer to us, if we're willing to do the things we need to do to create our best opportunity, right? So ageism and aging stereotypes, which I write about a lot in my book, it's so important. As I sit here at 64, I know I'm never going to run as fast as I did when I was 30. I mean, there are no more 2:39 Boston marathons in my body. That is for sure. But I can tell you that I know, for me to live the kind of life I want to live now and be in the present, and not, lament the past and be sad about what's gone and it's never going to be here, or to be anxious about the future and when my day will come. To live my best life today, right? I know I need to embrace what it means to be, what's the best part of being 64, and how can I embrace that?
Yeah. And celebrate achievement still, right? I think that a part of the human brain, isn't it, is that kind of the biases that we have around anchoring ourselves to certain things. A 3:39 marathon by 64-year-old Al Lyman, or a 4-hour marathon by 66-year-old Al Lyman. That's amazing, right? It's about the here and now, and setting those
100%.
those things. I've done a 3:59 marathon, so.
Good for you.
I mean, obviously not quite.
It's 26 miles any way you cut it.
So, Al, I'm really interested in, I suppose, understanding from you some of the signs around and it could be problems, but it also could be ways to help those problems. So a lot of people will look up and read about, I think, if they do any type of research about aging, which a lot of people I work with end up doing. They end up doing some sort of research about aging, and you'll get muscle mass, bone density, mental capacity come up. And I think there's some sort of fearfulness about strength and resistance training as you get older. It's kind of like, if I don't need to bodybuild, well, that's complete rubbish. Strength training or weight training. So yeah, just around that, the kind of the way that maybe as you get older, muscle mass decreases, bone density, and then obviously the impact on maybe our mental capacity. I know you've got lots of thoughts around that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. First of all, I'm doing, interestingly, a webinar this coming Monday evening, and it'll be recorded for any folks in the UK who won't be able to be live at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, called Stronger After 50. Where I'm going to talk specifically about how we can, in the safest and most efficient way possible, hold on to as much muscle as is possible. So, you opened a certainly, a broad and incredibly important topic, which is the effect of sarcopenia, which is a word that describes the loss of muscle as we age. And what's so important about that loss of muscle is the downstream effects to every aspect of our health, including our mental health, and our risk for chronic disease. Every day, the science is showing us that things like, I'll use the word myokines, which is a chemical that is released from muscle that has a direct impact on the health of the rest of our body. I mean, there are literally dozens of positive effects that come out of strength and muscle mass. So it is unequivocally the most important thing. The challenge is, for every individual person, is how do we get started? And in my book, I present the simplest and easiest way to get started, which is with isometric strength training. You don't need equipment. You don't need a gym. All you need is the basic understanding how to apply a couple of really simple principles. It's a great way to get started. But I'll tell you, one of the things I'm going to talk about on Monday, I don't like the term lift weights. And this is something you hear all the time. Oh, you got to lift weights. Well, for a 55-year-old woman who's never strength trained in her life before, what on earth does that mean?
Well, she'll just say no, won't she? She won't do it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But there's two reasons why I dislike the term. One is, it's not about, the term connotates that we need to do something to the weight. And the reality is that's not what we're doing. We have to do something to our muscles with whatever tool we're going to use. I don't care. It could be our own body. I mean, I can literally sit here and just clamp my hands together and squeeze hard for 10 seconds. And my intent and my effort will then induce some kind of an effect on my muscle. That is super safe to do and easy to do. So I don't like that term for that reason. But the second reason I don't like it is, inevitably in the fitness industry, we skip the basics and fundamentals and we go straight to the more challenging things. It frightens me when I think about, someone who's never strength trained before going into a gym and they get introduced to a barbell or they're doing box jumps. And I go, oh my God, and I'm thinking, injury is right around the corner. And the downside, of course, to injury is that you lose your whatever motivation or inspiration you had. You immediately blame yourself. You become sad, and then you say, "I'm never going to do that again." So everything I've done as a fitness professional and as a strength and conditioning coach and an endurance sports coach has been about establishing basic and fundamental skills, building stability, looking at joint articulation and range of motion, and just maintaining those things. And the truth is that all of these things are very accessible to us. They don't require a high skill level to perform. We just need the right kind of guidance. I give some of that in my book, but I open all of these things to the folks that I coach. So I give them, a little bit to chew on at a time in a way that they can feel good about their progress. And along the way, they're building fundamental movement skills. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, they're using it so they don't lose it fundamentally. But yeah, I'm going to talk about many of these things on Monday night. Listen, if we're going to strength train at my age, it's got to be safe. It's got to be convenient. It's got to be easy to perform, or I should say simple. Of course, effort is required. Effort is the great equalizer. Just by looking at a weight, we're not going to get stronger, or looking at, whatever tool we're going to use. And unequivocally, with the folks that I work with one-on-one, the thing they learn from me is that they're capable of much more effort than they realize. So we can do 5 or 10 minutes of concentrated effort. They'll get tremendous benefit from it. But inevitably they say, I was working a lot harder with you than I worked on my own. And I'm going, okay, well, guess what? This is what you got to bring home for yourself. But of course, it's got to be done. And we've got to use a modality that where the risk of injury is zero, right? It's nil, so that person can continue to build momentum and progress and then reap the benefits of that. And I'll say one last thing about bone density, which is hugely important. So when we put tension into muscle and that muscle pulls on tendons and then on ligaments, which attach that soft tissue or connective tissue to our bones become stronger. And in combination with some kind of gravity-based exercise like walking or hiking or, dare I say, running, not for the great majority, of course, these things are what help us to hold on to bone density. And virtually every person that I work with, at some point during our journey, I have them go through what's referred to as a DEXA scan. DEXA is the acronym. It's a very, very long name, but essentially what it is a full, what I think of as MRI of your body that shows you bone density, shows you location of fat, whether it's subcutaneous or visceral, that is to say deeper or more, near the surface of our skin. That surfacey fat, that subcutaneous fat is healthier. The deeper fat is more dangerous for our health. So a DEXA scan, while for some people it can be really difficult because it's a truth teller, right? It shows you everything. But it's a tremendous amount of valuable information that will help folks, again, get a baseline. This is where I am. This is my true body fat or body composition percent. This is where that body fat is. This is what my bone density is. And then with those numbers, you can then move forward.
I think that there's a couple of things there, Al. I think the one thing that I've experienced doing, exercising myself and all of that, and listening to my clients that go through this period, the enjoyment is there, right? They actually enjoy this. So if you're not working anymore or you're working less, I talk a lot about, retaining purpose and passion. Social connections is one of the biggest predeterminants towards happiness and everything. Exercise gives us an ability to enjoy something, look forward to something, and have some sort of social interaction with others, maybe, as you said, in a yoga class or coaching or whatever that looks like. So I think that the enjoyment factor is part of this as well, right? You're actually, you've got some structure in you and you're looking forward to what you're doing.
Dan, it's so funny in this day and age, right? I mean, there's so little that we have control over. Arguably, we have very little control over anything that's happening in our world. So to your point, when you embark on something and you can get a little bit of consistency with it as far as exercise is concerned, it's tremendously empowering. We feel like, okay, I'm taking control, and it can be enjoyable and it should be enjoyable. And the effort itself is a great reducer of stress. It's a great counterbalance to the innate, or I should say natural stressors that typically occur, especially in this day and age with the news cycle and everything else associated with it. So yeah, man, it's if we can just keep it going long enough, we can reap the benefits of all of the good feelings that usually happen after the initial trepidation about doing it in the first place.
And it's one of the keys to consistency there, Al, the fact that you've talked a lot about the foundational stuff. But if you know where you're starting from, then and you can see those incremental improvements along the way, that only adds to your want and desire to be consistent. I see a lot of people will just kind of, just go to the gym or go and do this. And I'm not saying that that's not a good thing. Doing something is better than doing nothing, obviously. But in my opinion, with most things in life, if you know the truth from where you're starting at, then you can really, truly progress and do things. And that keeps you going back for more. And there's, the research out there that says it takes 66 days to make something a habit, and if and so I think one of the things I will say for people listening, and one of the things I've really taken away from this conversation is don't be afraid of the truth. Start where you're at, and it doesn't matter where you're at, find out where you're at, and then just improve from there, because that's only going to add to you wanting to do it and enjoying it more.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more, Dan. One of my favorite quotes, and it's in the book. I think it was Gloria Steinem who said it. The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. It's all about those,
Yeah.
setting that baseline and embracing where you are. And to your point, I have a gentleman that I've been working with who was quite significantly overweight when we started working together, and I knew because of a variety of factors that his levels of systemic chronic inflammation was quite high, and in part that comes from the fat as well, which tends to spit out a lot of damaging chemicals into the body, which are inflammatory. And one of the most important markers, as I mentioned earlier, for me, in terms of chronic disease, is monitoring systemic or chronic inflammation. But I was able to, we got that baseline. He looked at that number; it scared him to death, which is to say, C-reactive protein, which is a marker for systemic chronic inflammation. And he was really saddened to see how high it was initially. But we have dropped that number like dramatically. In fact, I think I posted at one point on LinkedIn about it, and I shared his numbers. And it's totally changed his outlook. He had a positive one anyway, but when he could see that progress, and really know that the changes he was making was working, that he moved that number from one that, was very dangerous to one that's within a normal range. He knew he's on his way, and you can't put a price on that,
Absolutely. I think, and also one of the things that really strikes me, again, all of my work that I do around kind of around us as human beings and what makes us tick is the sense of achievement, right? One of the things that often an unsuccessful retiree or a retiree that doesn't enjoy their retirement will say is that they don't achieve much. They can't achieve. They had a career of achievement, stepping up the ladder of doing things, and we get to a point actually where human beings are wired for more. Right, this sense of enough is not something that we like to move forward and achieve. And I just think, getting to a point where there's something staring right in front of us that we can go, actually, we can achieve things. Losing weight, dropping body fat, dropping crucial numbers, getting our bloods back better. All of that will absolutely play into us as human beings and a sense of personal achievement and pride, which I think gives us more energy and more health span and everything that we that we talked about before.
I couldn't agree more. And to be very honest with you, Dan, and I'm going to be honest here. I look around at, folks my age and older, and, to your point, we do latch on to the material possessions we've, accumulated, right? Whether it's a beautiful home, a nice car, some career achievements, perhaps building a business, all of the things that I know many of our listeners can relate to. But when I look around, I think to myself, you can't take it with you. And all of those things, when they're built on, a platform of what I believe is ill health or some degree of ill health, I shake my head because I go, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And, I think back to my mom's passing. I mean, this past week, there were so many things that she had that were important to her, that are important to all of us, and other people would laugh at what she thought was important. And we all have our things. But when she became, truly terminally ill, none of those things were important to her anymore. And the truth is that she passed without any of them. And I think that's if I could walk up to every person, and I'd say, you have a beautiful home, but you and I know you're not healthy in the way that you need to be. Can we talk honestly for a moment here? Because listen, and this is true. This is really true for people in the 30 to 25 to 45 age group, because at that point, their habits haven't really manifested in the kinds of what I think of as the indignities of aging. They're coming, but it hasn't happened yet. And I want to shake those people and go, if you don't change now, it's going to be so much harder to change later. And, you're not feeling it, you're not experiencing it now, but you will. You got to wake up.
Yeah. Look, what's the point in working for it all if you can't? And so let me define this. What's the point in working for it all where you accumulate some level of financial wealth and then you get to a point where you can spend your money and your time on stuff? What's the point of doing all of that if you can't take advantage of your time and therefore the money that you've worked with? I think that is, fundamental to making sure that people do start to think about this very differently as they approach their retirement.
I don't know whether this is actually true or not, but it's reputed to be true that Steve Jobs, who passed at 56 from pancreatic cancer, was quoted as saying that he could pay anybody to do anything for him, but he couldn't pay anybody to be sick for him. And I believe he passed with about $7 billion in net worth. So I think, whether or not he actually said that, I know for a fact that he was well aware that it seemed like anything was possible for him, except that he could have someone else be sick.
Yeah, absolutely. Al, it's been such a fascinating conversation. I've got one last question I want to ask you, if that's all right with you, and then we'll wrap things up. But I think you might already be living it. But what does Al Lyman's second half look like? What does life look like for you over the next 20, 30 years, if you can think that far ahead?
Well, I think that far ahead every day. I always think, we want to try to reverse engineer our life as much as we possibly can. I'll tell you, Dan, I've had an incredibly rewarding career as a musician. I continue to perform with our local symphony here in Venice on the Gulf Coast of Florida. I've had a long career, more than 25 years as an endurance sports coach, coaching folks to Ironman finishes. I coach a 5-time Ironman age group world champion who is from Norway. But as I sit here at 64, I'm embarking on this aging coaching, as you mentioned earlier, coaching aging and aspiring adults to take back control of their health and live stronger in their second half. So as I sit here right now at 64, I've got my book, and I feel like, Dan, I haven't even gotten started. I feel like I'm just beginning. When most people, or at least a great percentage of people my age, are thinking, man, I can't wait to enjoy my retirement. I don't know what that means exactly, but to me, I feel like, I got a lot to prove. I don't know what's going on. The second is, along with that, is I have 2 grandchildren, Theo and Josie, 5 and a year and a half. I have 2 children. Those 2 grandkids are my daughter's 2 children. And I'm so excited about the prospect of running around in the yard with those kids as they grow, racing my grandson Theo, from here to the stop sign, when he's 15 and, I'm 74. I'm looking forward to the day, and I'm planning for it, Dan, when I can be at their wedding. And not just someone in a wheelchair sitting in the back of the room, but participating, leading the dance in the middle of the floor. And then, God willing, maybe be around for the birth of their children, and again, repeat the process of running around in the yard with them. This is my vision. This is the dream that I have. And of course, it's a mystery. We don't know what's going to happen, but I try to live every day giving myself the best opportunity. And I'll say one additional thing, because we haven't really delved into this yet. And I'm sure your listeners are thinking, oh, Al, you everything's easy for you. And it's all about being perfect. And, you've done all of this all your life. Well, you're not me. I want to make sure everybody knows this is not about and has never been about perfection. I eat hamburgers. I occasionally, snack on foods I shouldn't be. There are occasional days where I'm like, I don't feel like working out today. All of those things happen. But when I make those choices, they happen very intermittently. It's not frequently. But I always know I've got my baseline of lifestyle, how I live, the way I think. So I always can come back to it. So it is not and never will be about perfection. It's really about a lifestyle transformation where we can at least give ourselves the best chance to create those memories that I know are important to all of us. Just as you alluded to earlier, humans want that next thing. I know we're all trying. We all want to be the best version of ourselves. And we all want to have this opportunity to live stronger in our second half.
Al, what a wonderful place. This has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I think the links to all of your book, Age Well and Feel Great, I'm going to order it and I'm going to link it into the show notes. Your blogs are amazing. I've read a number of them. Your newsletter, the Age Optimizer newsletter, I'll put that in there. I encourage all the listeners to visit your website, have a look through your content, subscribe to the stuff, view the webinars, etc. Because I think it's such a wonderful resource that fits so perfectly in with the work that I do. But for anybody that's approaching the second phase of their life and thinking about retirement, this is fundamental. This is as foundational as thinking about how much money do you need. How much money do you need? How much health do you need? Are both equally as actually, probably health is more important than money, right? Let's get there. So the foundational stuff around health is so important. So I encourage anyone to do and to reach out to you as well if they feel like they can have any questions, etc. So Al, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been so enlightening, and thank you for your time and your knowledge and your wisdom and condensing kind of 30 years of all of that into an hour's conversation. I do really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for the opportunity to share what I've learned. I'm honored to be here with you. And yeah, I would certainly encourage any listeners that are looking to take control of their health to reach out. There's nothing that makes me happier than to have a positive impact on the lives of others. And help folks to live their best life and live stronger in their second half. So thank you so much for what you're doing and for the opportunity.
I appreciate that. Thanks. And the last thank you is for everyone listening. So thank you everyone once again for tuning in to the Humans versus Retirement podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure as always to have you along with me today. Until next time, take care. Thanks for tuning in to the Humans versus Retirement podcast. I hope this show will arm you with insights, strategies, and a newfound excitement for navigating life beyond the 9-to-5 grind. Remember, retirement isn't just an endpoint, it's a vibrant chapter brimming with opportunities for growth, adventure, and purpose. Keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the next phase of your life with enthusiasm. Until next time, may your retirement dreams continue to flourish and inspire.